Welcome back, everyone. Time to do another late 2020 review. I was about to say mid 2020 review of the Samsung Galaxy Note 9. Now, this is one of the most perplexing and probably one of the best phones ever made, in my opinion. At least one of the best priced phones right now. Now, unfortunately, there were some developments recently, I think with the Note 20's release, that kind of made the Note 9 a little bit of a weirder value. Not to say it's a worse one, but basically to kind of spoil it. With the Note 20 release, Samsung pretty much said that, the older Androids are also going to be getting an extra year of software support, but the cutoff was the Samsung Galaxy S10 and the Note 10. So unfortunately, the Samsung Galaxy Note 9 is pretty much unsupported right now. Well, it's still supported for the time being, but it's not going to be getting One UI 3, which does kind of suck. But it did get One UI 2.5, which I think is also a pretty important thing. Now, if you want to pick one of these things up, you can pick them up on Amazon for less than $400, and I'll find the cheapest one on there and link it down in the description. You can get it from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now, looking on the front of the Samsung Galaxy Note 9, you can see this thing has a 6.4-inch Super AMOLED display, and it's a really good panel. I mean, this thing is 1440p, and I've even said before, like, this panel rivals a lot of the panels coming out this year. I think this phone's screen looks better than the iPhone 12 Pro Max, than the 11 Pro Max, than even the standard Note 20 for sure. And it's pretty much up there with like the Galaxy S20 Ultra, but this thing does not have a higher refresh rate. So that kind of makes, those specific phones like the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra and the Note 20 Ultra better deals because of that higher refresh rate. But for the way this phone looks and for the panel itself, it is really, really strong. I mean, it's one of its strongest assets for sure. It has a little bit of bezel on the top and bottom, but other than that, it doesn't look bad. It still looks extremely capable for 100% of a fact, and it's still one of my favorite things about this phone for sure. Now on the bottom, you have that USB Type-C port, which is cool. And you also have that S Pen, which I know a lot of you guys already know what it is, but I'll kind of briefly hit on it. I mean, it's pretty much just a stylus that kind of brings a little bit more flavor to the phone. You can draw on it, you can, take notes, and it's more than just a stylus. I mean, it has a lot of capability. It's like its own machine in that specific S Pen. And if I ever had an Android phone, I would use a Galaxy series because of the S Pen. I mean, I have Androids, but if I were to use it as a main phone, I would use it because of the S Pen for sure. So that is one of my favorite things about that phone as well. Now, on the back, you have that standard glass back, which I think is really cool. You have that fingerprint sensor as well. This phone has wireless charging, which is really cool. But you also have that dual camera setup up top as well. And I think this is also a really strong asset for this device. It's a dual 12 megapixel setup. You have a 12 megapixel wide, then a 12 megapixel telephoto lens. And what's really cool is you can do 4K at 60 on that camera, which I think is really awesome. You can also only do 1440p on the front, which kind of sucks. And it may be one of the worst aspects of this phone. It's definitely not even that bad, but 1440p compared to 4K at 60 at a lot of new phones, that's definitely not the best thing. It's an only 8 megapixel sensor. Again, not a deal breaker, but it would have been better if this phone had like 4K on the front. But again, this was back in 2018, so it's totally okay. Now with that back camera, I will say for the most part, it's more than capable enough for getting the job done. I think it's a very good camera setup. Anytime you take any photos or videos on it, it's going to be, be able to handle everything just fine. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. It still, has a couple of downfalls, like compared to nowadays, a lot of phones can do 8K now. The Note 9 does not have that capability, but I still think that's more than enough for a lot of people. The quality is great. I think low light conditions is where this phone kind of sucks out a little bit. Again, not a deal breaker, but it is something to keep in mind. And I think for the average person, if you were to get a Note 9, I think you would honestly be very, very happy with it. But I've said this before and I'll say it again. I just don't think a lot of people are sitting there and trying to make, like cinema quality videos from their phone. I think a lot of them are just sending Snapchats or making TikToks or posting videos on YouTube or something. And I think for tasks like that, this phone is more than capable enough. Definitely not perfect, but it definitely for sure gets the job done 100% of a fact. So in terms of the camera quality, this thing gets a thumbs up for me in my books. And even externally, I mean, this thing still has IP certification, which is cool. This thing has a microSD card slot, which I don't know if I already hit on that, but that in and of itself is a huge asset for this phone. A lot of the newer phones coming out, including the Note 20 standard, the Note 10 standard, and all the OnePlus phones, they don't have any microSD card slots, which really does suck. The Samsung Galaxy Note 9 actually has that capability, which in my opinion is one of its best assets for sure, and a huge reason why I prefer the Samsung Galaxy Note 9 over maybe even the Note 10, the standard one, because of that micro SD card slot, which that in and of itself, like I said before, is a huge aspect. Now, software wise, like I said before, this thing is almost done getting support. It's not going to be getting One UI 3. It will probably get security updates for a little bit longer, but it's not going to go much further. Unfortunately, this phone could more than enough support it with the hardware inside, but Samsung and One UI, this is how it is. You guys already know how it is. But I will say for a majority of people out there, getting this phone is still more than capable. I mean, the software is there. It's Android 10. It's not going to be unsupported with apps or anything anytime soon. So even if you pick it up, the software I think is more than enough for now, but it's going to be outdated very, very soon. And in terms of the hardware aspect of this phone, I mean, this thing has that Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 chipset with 8 gigabytes of RAM on the top model, 8 gigabytes, not what I said, and 6 gigabytes of RAM on the bottom tier model. Is it a big deal? Is it a deal breaker? Not really. I mean, I think I will be honest, this phone for a 2018 phone still has a lot of capability in terms of the hardware. It's definitely not the fastest thing in the world, but the mixture of the build quality and the mixture of the software, and I will say the hardware, kind of makes it a decent, feeling phone and feeling just performing phone overall. I feel like with the One UI 2, the, improvements in the gesture-based design and the animations and everything have really made this phone feel and perform that much smoother. It's still not perfect. It still has a lot of hiccups here and there, but for day-to-day tasks, I will tell you, I think this phone is more than capable enough for handling everything you throw at it. So it's definitely not the best phone in the world, but performance-wise, it'll definitely get the job done. I've done a lot of speed tests between this phone and the Note 20 Ultras and all those phones, and by far the Note 20s, the Note 10s, the Samsung Galaxy S20s, those phones are going to be better performing phones for sure. I'm not trying to say this phone is, worse or better than those ones, but I will tell you this phone definitely isn't as good as those phones when it comes down to the performance, but for a majority of things you're going to do with it, it's still going to be able to be perfectly fine, I would imagine. So in terms of performance, I'll definitely say it's a thumbs up for a 2018 phone. Still not that great, but it gets the job done for sure. Now, ending it off with the battery life, this thing has a 4,000 mAh battery inside of it, which that is a huge asset for it. Now, with other phones that are now coming out, they have reverse wireless charging and stuff. This thing just has that standard wireless charging, which I think is great, but it would have been better if this thing had reverse charging, just like how newer phones have it. So if you get this phone, that's going to be one of the disadvantages. But the battery life itself is actually pretty strong. It can last for many days. I don't want to overhype it. It's a 4,000 mAh battery. It's the same size pretty much as the Galaxy S20. It just doesn't have that high refresh rate, so you'll save a little bit of battery there. So it's not bad. It's not the best, but it's definitely not a bad size battery either. It's actually really good, to be honest. So to kind of sum up this video and to answer the question, should you pick up the Samsung Galaxy Note 9 in the later part of 2020, I will tell you, there's a lot of assets for this phone. There's the beautiful screen on it. I mean, that screen is still an amazing display. It performs extremely well in terms of the quality of that panel. You have that curved design architecture on the phone, which adds that much more flavor to the device itself, which is really nice. You have a pretty decent camera setup. It's still not perfect, but like I said before, it gets the job done for sure. The battery life, I think, is on the better side as well. You have a fingerprint sensor on the back, which is a really nice asset. And you also have the Samsung DeX. I didn't even get on that, but you can use this phone kind of as a desktop experience too with Samsung DeX with that USB Type-C port on the bottom. So that may be a big deal for some people. Some people maybe even use Samsung DeX as their main, computing machine. And if you're one of those people, you have that capability on the Samsung Galaxy Note 9. You have the micro SD card slot support, the S Pen. There's just so much there on this phone. However, because of the software limitations in terms of how many more software versions it's going to get, as well as a couple other things like I listed in this video, I think it's kind of in that middle ground where it's, kind of a decent deal, but it's still not that great in terms of, you can get it for less than $400, but you can also get a Galaxy S10 for less than $400 as well. And I would probably recommend picking up a Samsung Galaxy S10 over the Note 9 because of the longer software support and as well as the hardware. There's just better hardware on the S10 than the Note 9. So that's another thing. Again, not the end of the world, but that's kind of how I would see the Note 9 in the later part of 2020. It's still not perfect, but it's not a bad phone either. And if you want to pick it up right now, I'll say go for it, but don't plan on keeping this phone for like 4 more years. Maybe you can, but the software is going to be its biggest limitation, like I stated. So that really pretty much covers it up. If you guys have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count. So it means so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.